The Common App Activities section has a very limited description section. I think it's only 150 characters to describe your entire extracurricular activity and everything you've done in it. And if it's something you've been doing for the past 4 years, 150 characters isn't a whole lot of space. As a result, some schools let you elaborate on one of your activities more through a supplemental essay. In fact, some schools have the same exact essay prompt with the same wording, the same word limit, the same everything. In those cases, I literally just copied and pasted my essay for each school that had that prompt. And speaking of my essay, let's take a look at it. Briefly elaborate on one of your extracurricular activities or work or family responsibilities. 150 words. To win a spot on WGBH's high school quiz show, our quiz team faced off against team after team, making our way to the semifinals. Then, disaster struck. The match felt off. Every time we pressed the buzzer, nothing happened. The other team gained a hefty lead. Then I saw it. Our buzzer's cables were disconnected. We explained the discovery to the show host, Jeff Kinney, my favorite childhood author and now mortal enemy, but he insisted we continue after a half-hearted attempt to fix the cables. Unsurprisingly, we lost. It should have ended at that, but our coach wouldn't accept it. Seeing her stand her ground against the big shot producer lit our fighting spirits. We protested and wouldn't let up until they let us redo the match, with new buzzers. We won the rematch, then the finals. Now moving on, will our struggles pay off? Tune into High School Quiz Show to find out. In this essay, there were a number of things that I tried to avoid. I avoided talking about things that I already mentioned in the description under the activity section because in your application, there is only so much space for you to talk about so many different things. So you really want to make sure that every word counts and you're really optimizing your use of your whole application. So if you're repeating things that you already mentioned in other sections, then you're just being redundant at that point. And this additional piece that's just a rehashing of something you already mentioned earlier isn't going to add anything new to your application. So for example, if in your activities section, you're talking about the accomplishments you had in one of your activities or what exactly you do, in this extracurricular activity essay, you can talk about the actual process of how you accomplish those things. It would also be good to avoid flexing and trying to brag about all these different accomplishments you have, because chances are, if you're applying to these schools, there are going to be tons of other applicants who have more impressive accomplishments than you. So if your tone comes off as really bragging, then that isn't going to give the best impression of you. So even if you have these really amazing accomplishments that you're super proud of, you should still try to maintain a modest tone in how you write about them, just so that you don't come off as arrogant or bragging. And since the word count for this specific prompt was so short, it was only 150 words, I would recommend avoiding talking about your overall experience in an activity and instead focus on a specific event or a specific story within that activity that you can really highlight and focus on. I applied to Harvard Early Action, and so the essay that I just read for you guys, I hadn't actually written yet at that point. So my essay back then was completely different. It was about my overall experience in student government, and trying to talk about an entire 4 years and 150 words isn't really that effective, and you kind of spread yourself out too thin and don't give yourself the room to really develop those ideas. So I would recommend focusing on one specific story, like in the essay that I wrote for my other schools, and in that way you'll have more word space to actually develop the things that you want to talk about. And lastly, this isn't really something that's super bad, but it is still something that I would recommend you try to avoid if you can, which is talking about an activity that you already wrote about for a different essay. So this means that if for your Common App essay or for a different supplemental essay, you wrote about a certain extracurricular activity, for this essay, the extracurricular activity essay, you should try to talk about a different activity, which you will hopefully have if you've already filled out the activities section. And this goes back to the point of rehashing material that you've already talked about before, because if for the extracurricular activity essay, you're already talking about something that you mentioned in your Common App essay, chances are you won't have that much more stuff to elaborate on for this activity essay. So if you can, try to talk about a different activity. Of course, that's not always possible. So if you have to reuse an activity that you already talked about for a different essay, I would recommend that you at least try to take a different approach from it or glean some other different message than the one that you talked about in your previous essay. And in terms of things that you do want to do in this essay, I would recommend trying to make the story as action-packed as possible. Since it's only 150 characters, you don't really have too much room to talk about like some super deep reflections, because those are usually saved for essays that have a bit longer of a word count. So I would recommend making the story as action-packed as possible so that it's as memorable to whoever's reading it as possible. This means making your essay as unique as possible, whether that's by talking about a really unique activity that you have that not a lot of other people would have, or talking about a really specific instance or a really unique story from one of your other activities. And by making your essay action-packed and focusing as much on the plot as possible, you're able to show your character through your actions rather than by telling them through words. So in my activity essay, I touched upon themes of resilience and standing up for yourself, but at no point in my essay did I say, I am resilient, because it's more effective to show that in actions rather than in just words. And so overall, for this essay, you can really take your story and just strip it down to its bare bones so that you can throw some really strong punches. And as general advice for your essays, you want to add enough details to your story to make it specific enough such that it wouldn't be possible to replace your name with someone else's and really make this story your own. It's also important to show the lessons that you've learned and show how you've grown as a person so that you can leave an impression in your application readers and have a memorable essay. And whenever possible, you should try to recycle essays. In a lot of cases, colleges will have pretty similar prompts or maybe even the same exact prompt. So you can just copy and paste your essay between schools because you don't need to write an entirely new essay for a different school if you already have an essay that you wrote for a previous school. And that's the advice I have for the extracurricular activity essay. So for all of you who are currently applying to colleges, I wish you the best of luck. If you're looking for specific advice on what you can do to improve your Common App essay, check out this video here, or feel free to check out any of the other videos I have on my channel related to how to approach the different kinds of supplemental essays.